psychologist at Samvid, where she continues to deepen her clinical practice and engagement in psychological interventions. Arva has closely worked with children and adolescents, supporting their emotional, behavioral, and cognitive needs through therapeutic and preventive approaches. Her work reflects a strong commitment to fostering healthy communication and emotional growth among young individuals. In this webinar on effective communication with adolescents, Arva draws from her clinical experience to offer practical insights and strategies for building meaningful and empathetic connections with adolescents. I hope you enjoy the webinar today, and over to you, Arva ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Christie, for such a wonderful introduction. I'll just start sharing my screen. I hope my screen is visible to everyone.
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Yeah. All right. A very good evening to one and all present here, and thank you for joining this session. As in today's session, we are going to deal with again and yet one of the most important topic, which is effective communication with adolescents, which I'm sure every parent who's having a teen or an adolescent at home must somewhere or the other be juggling with how to communicate with them, make them understand, or on the other hand, how to understand their point of view and their perspective. So, with the help of this particular webinar, we are going to try to understand that how effective communication with adolescents would help not just them, but the parents as well. So first, let us just give a small introduction about what is communication. So it is an act which involves more than two people, and it is an act by which a person shares their knowledge, feelings, ideas, and information. It is also a medium of social interaction, and in a communication situation, as I mentioned, two or more individuals interact with one another. Now, if we have to understand what is an effective communication, and when it comes to with adolescents, there are four components that both the parties need to understand. First, I would start by saying the body language or the gesture being the first component. The second component would be the feelings and emotions. The third being the use of words, the kind of words that are being used in the communication. This not just applies to the adolescent or the teen, but it also is applicable to the parent. The next is the tone of voice. So if we highlight these four aspects in and around it, the four components is a combination of thereby leading to an effective communication, because when you are communicating with your teen or with your adolescent, all these four factors need to be kept in mind, whether how you are in terms of your body language or gestures, whether are you too close or are you too permissive for the child, or second is how your words are affecting the adolescent or the parents' feelings and emotions, and the tone of voice. Whether you have to be too loud to a conversation which can just be dealt on a minimal tone, but of course the use of words and the tone of voice matters the most when it comes to effective communication. Now, adolescence is the stage of transition we all understand, and the youngsters has the tendency to experimentation. So they are themselves in this juggling pattern, because they are not only trying to understand themselves, but they are also trying to validate their emotions, their feelings, their thought process, their the criticisms or the setbacks that comes onto them. So they are on a constant urge of understanding where do they stand. And during this period, they undergo series of emotional changes, because here the brain is still in the developing process. Communicating with adolescents is an art, and hence we should understand how we can communicate with adolescents effectively. Okay. Now, what is the need for communication with adolescents? The main purpose of the communication is to change or guide the other person's behavior. Now, how effectively we are communicating with the child is also upon us, whether we are in favor of the child or trying to understand the perspective of the child, or whether we are just trying to impose our values, our thoughts, or forcing them to comply by us. So here I have highlighted three functions that we need to understand. One is the information function. Now, what do we understand by this? It is the basic function to provide or receive information. Now, if I give you a small example for this, so the information function, how you can use it on your adolescent is like you have a wedding to attend, and the information is passed on to the child that at 7 o'clock you have to be ready. So this is the information which is communicated to the child. No matter what, 7, everybody needs to be ready. Now next we come to the command. Uh, the command or instructive function. Now what do we understand by this? So here the parent is trying to set or provide certain instructions to the child. For example, for this particular function could be you are asking the child to go to a particular grocery shop where you are naming the grocery shop, and you are giving a list of items that the child is supposed to bring from that. So you're providing him with certain instructions, and you're also asking the child that you have to go to this particular shop and bring these many things from the shop. Now, influence and persuasive function. By this, it is nothing but we're trying to communicate in the form of influencing one's ideas, feelings, knowledge, and thoughts. That is, for example, suppose if you are passionate about one particular sport, be it basketball or be it cricket or football. So you try to make the child understand how in your childhood days you used to play this particular sport, and you're trying to encourage the child in order to, why don't you also be a part of such activities? Moving on to next, communication skills for teens. Now, communication is a key life skills for teenagers, and it is an area, teenager is an area that many struggle with, especially when it comes to communicating with teens. So, the parents here who's having a teen must understand and probably would agree that at this phase of life where they are under constant changes and they are battling their thought process, their emotions, it is also becoming very challenging for the parent in order to how to interact or communicate with the teen by letting them know that they are there for them, and also to understand that they are there to hear them out and also to understand their perspective. Now, these struggle could be due to the changes that occur in brain during the teenage years, and these changes can contribute to unpredictable emotions, which affect your interactions with others. Moving on to the next one, which is called the benefits of good communication skills. So, first is collaborate effectively. So, when you're having a communication or a conversation with your team, understand that both parties are equally involved. If the teen is trying to express his thoughts, views, or feelings, it is the parents' way of understanding it, what the child is trying to say, and at the same time, not just to listen to them, but in case if you have your opinions and thoughts, you can wait till your teen completes whatever he or she has to share, and then you all can put forward your thought process. So you all are collaborating, you are together working in that communication where both parties are being heard. The next thing is prevent misunderstanding. Now, there are a lot of times it happens that the parent trying to make the teen understand, which is for their own good, but because they are in that mindset that my father or my mother is always imposing their thoughts and their rules, and I have to adhere to it, and it could thereby create a misunderstanding in teen that my parent does not understand me. So here it becomes again important for the parent to let the teen know that they are there and they're hearing you out, and they're also understanding their perspective. So, in order to prevent this misunderstanding, both parties should be equally heard. At the same time, the space and the time should be given for both parties. So, if the conversation, for example, is leading to an argument, at that point in time, when you know that your teen is, after a point, just not listening to you, probably one of the parents can just walk out of the conversation and give that space till the teen comes back to its normal state. The next one is handle and resolve conflicts. Of course, when two parties interact, there are different ideas, ideologies, there are different perspectives, and there can be conflicts that can happen. Because what you might not be approval for your teen, the teen might not be approval of you. So, in that way, when such situations come, it has to be dealt in a proper way and such that you're able to handle the conflicts and resolve it by making the teen understand. Probably at that point in time when he or she is not in a state of mind to understand whatever you try to say, but resolve it whenever it is a good time. Next, establish trust. That is something which is very important when you're having a communication with your teen. If you do not give that space to your teen or you do not hear them out, then you're not letting or giving that space of trust to build in the teen for yourself that, okay, they can open up to you and they can talk to you for whatever they have within them and have an open space to have the discussion. If they are not being heard or if they feel that there's no one paying attention to whatever he or she is trying to communicate, then that safe space closes in this in to a fact that they only get limited to certain information that they want to share. They would come to you. Apart from that, they would not have a close interaction. So it is very important when you're having a communication with your teen to establish trust. The next is build empathy. Empathy, as in, if the teen is juggling with some disturbing thoughts, be it could be peer pressure or be it some things which is disturbing in terms of academics. There's too much of pressure that he or she has to take on if the exams are nearing and things like that. So at that point in time, when the teen tries to come and interacts with you, we as a parent have to be more approachable and have to understand what they are saying from their perspective. So, in order to build empathy, it is very important that we are trying to understand their perspective. The next, what I'm going to highlight is the 7 important communication skills for the teenagers to learn. Of course, parents have various ways of understanding and the tips and strategies that would be discussed in the further slides. But there are certain skills that teenagers can learn while they are interacting with others or with the parents. First is listening actively. So again, if communication involves two people, very important thing is that if one person is trying to share their thought process, the other has to listen to it and try to understand without interrupting. So you have to actively be a part of it. And for listening actively, the gestures that you could use could be nodding head or probably a maintaining direct eye contact. So that is very important. Second is choosing the right communication channel. Now, definitely, when teens are also exposed to gadgets, of course, they have their cell phones and things like that. They have their own peer group. While they are communicating with others, they have to understand the importance of the situation or the conversation if it is happening with either the parent or with one of their peer. They need to understand which communicating channel would prefer the best at that particular situation, whether it is a WhatsApp text message and what should be the sequencing of that text message. Second, it should be if you have to have a face to face conversation, you need to adhere to that and you have to fix it up in such a way that the conversation which needs to be dealt on a face to face platform that should be catered to it. So, using the right communication channel and the platform plays a very important role while you're trying to communicate with the other person. The next is being clear, direct, and concise. That is, whatever you're communicating, it has to have a specific context. In the way, like if you're in a disagreement with your peer or with your parent, it needs to be directly communicated in a way that okay, suppose if you do not adhere to certain rules of house, like probably going to bed early, so that does not mean that you can directly indulge into a fight with your parent. You can probably express it in such a way that this is something that you're not in approval of, and if together both parties can work on it. So things like that, which can be handled, where you are more conscious about the use of words that you are trying to put in the conversation, and also the way you are communicating it by the tone of voice, which we highlighted in the very beginning. Because our effective communication do surrounds around these aspects, which is the mindful use of words in order to not harm anybody's emotions or make the other person feel vulnerable. So the use and the choices of words plays a very important role. At the same time, the tone of voice. The next thing being is being aware of your body language. Of course, if you're having a communication, which is a face-to-face communication, so there is certain distance which needs to be maintained, because you can't be too close to the person, because of course it also shows like you're intervening into someone's space, and the other person might not be comfortable and would be taken aback. So it is very important the kind of body language or the gestures that we are trying to show while we are having a communication or a conversation with the other person. Now, you could use it more by showing positive cues in a way like maintaining a eye contact. Very important. When two people are interacting, eye contact needs to be present so that the other person feels that you're being heard and listened. Next one is nodding occasionally. So, whatever information is being passed or whatever deep conversations that are happening, when you're actively listening to it, of course, one of the gesture could be you're nodding the head, which again gives the other person the assurity that you're being heard. Next is smiling. Of course, it is not that always you can have a very intense conversation. If there is something which which is very funny, or which is something which you require to give a smile, because if you constantly keep a very serious face, again, it would give a doubt to the other person that whether this person is actually listening to me or probably zoning out. Next is displaying an open posture. The next point that we will highlight is keeping your emotions in check. So be mindful by not getting carried away with your own emotions, and use and avoid to use very mean or unhelpful things. For example, if a teen is hurt by one of the peers' behavior, and his or her mood is absolutely off, and he or she is just not willing to interact with the parent, but the parent is trying to understand what has gone wrong and is trying to communicate with the teen. At that point in time, it is very important for them that yes, emotionally they are feeling vulnerable, but because of that, they should not use any words which would again hurt the feeling of the parent. So that the teen needs to understand how mindful can be with their emotions. And the techniques that they could use for understanding this aspect would be practice being aware of your emotions. Of course, whenever you feel vulnerable, but at the same time, you also have to deal with the situation and try to identify what emotions you are undergoing, and try to name those emotions. If it is feeling anxious or if it is feeling very sad, try to identify those emotions and work around it how you can control them. Figure out the healthy ways to cope with your emotions. The next is understanding how to handle conflict. Of course, when there is any situation or any circumstances which or a conversation that thereby leads into a conflict, one needs to act in a certain way. First is by not crossing their boundaries or using any words or statements which would affect the other person's emotion. And also take the charge of, if you're indulging into a conflict, how you would try to handle it in a way where it helps both the parties, not just you. The last is controlling your tone and volume. So, definitely, the parents at one point in time would have this sort of a conversation with the teen where, to an extent, they would be calm because they have just had very much patience of not reacting to it. But after a point, because the teen is just not willing to listen, the automatically the parents' voice raises. But at that point in time, one thing needs to be understand when that happens. Again, we at our unconscious are not aware that what words or what are we saying at that point in time, because teens are very sensitive towards that. The minute if they hear a loud voice or if they hear a statement that is something, they probably catch it and they're like, okay, you don't understand me, you always shout at me, you always want to scold me and things like that. So that's why it's very important while communicating with teen, the way we are managing our tone of voice in order to make them feel comfortable. Now, how to effectively communicate with your teen. Okay. So the first one is praise positive behavior. Definitely, when a parent and a teen are having a conversation, the teen is always in a mindset that my father or mother are going to only scold me or they're only going to target what things that I've done bad. So that becomes their mindset while they approach to you for a communication. So at that point in time, what parents need to understand is instead of course, there are some faults, but why not just praise certain things which they have actually done it well? Probably they came back from school and they have organized their table well, they've kept everything properly, they have been eating or completing their homework on time, and things like that. So, all such things, when you're interacting with your teen, when you highlight the positive behavior of it, would also give self confidence to the teen in order to not see it in a way that my parents are always complaining. They're also there to also praise their behavior, which they have done it on the right track. Second is listen, listen and don't monopolize the conversation. Again, a classic thing that happens between a parent and a teen is like uh, parents want to pass on certain information. They want to say things about what they are okay with, what they are not okay with. And at one point in time, that turns out to be a lecture for the teen and not giving them the space of having an interaction. So it is very important that both parties are equally interacting. If the parents have their perspective, then the equal space should be given to the teen to also express their thoughts and ideas and their perspective to be heard. That's how you would control by not just you only communicating, and it could work other way around where the teen is continuously going on, and the parent has to just listen to whatever the child is saying. The third one is limit preaching and attempting to persuade. Now, by this point, what we understand is that, of course, parents are in an authoritative figure, and there are certain rules and restrictions which are being, built by the parents that they expect the child needs to follow. But at the same time, one thing they have to understand that even they are in this growing space and they are trying to figure out various aspects, and there's a lot of trial and error happening in their life as well because they are confused at the same time they're identifying various situations, controlling their emotions and things like that. So at that point in time, if the parents try to talk about like when we were at your age we used to do things, and if they expect that their teen also should work according to them, then that would definitely lead into a fact that at the end your teen might just comply to whatever you are saying. On the other hand, if it could be worked in such a way that you had a way of dealing with things like this, let's let's find out together what the team is trying to understand or highlight, like this is the way he or she wants to handle the situation. So if that space is given to the teen as well, then probably they will learn how to handle conflicts or how to face the challenging situations. Next is don't match your team's emotion. Of course, one such day would be in the parents' house where the teen is upset about something, or the child is just not happy about something, and the entire house is in that era of if he or she is upset means there is not going to be any conversation, or we just have to deal with the emotion that the child is going through. But that's what the parents need to understand it, that if she is having that upset phase, how can you try to convert that and let not control their emotions, the entire house environment? And if you have something more good and happy about it, why not you also express that? Because of course there are a lot of times parents are like, okay, the child is upset, it does not feel good about it and things like that, and they also start getting into that same phase of what the teen is going through. On the other hand, if it could be turned into a positive way, then both it could be worked in such a way that if the child at that point in time was feeling upset, but because you have something more interesting and more fun, the child could get involved into it. So that's how you're trying to not match the teen's emotion. Now, avoid judging and dismissing feelings. Now, parents must understand that they are in the awkward stage of struggling. The teens are in the awkward stage of struggling there to in order to find their personal identity, and also they want to be accepted by the peer group and not the parent group. So if the child comes to you and shares something like, uh, in school there is this best friend and they had a conflict, and she said some things to her which she's not in approval of, and you as a parent, because you know that this girl has certain challenges that she's been facing, instead of understanding from your teen, you're just trying to blame it on the girl. Like, see, I told you this is what is going to happen. I had warned you not to be friends with her. So in this way, you're also judging and dismissing the child's feelings. And then if the child for the next time would want to come and share certain things with you, would think that if I go, this is the reaction I'm going to get from my parents. Next is speak concretely. Okay, so concretely, nothing but you to be more specific and precise about what you want from the teen. For example, if you ask the teen, kindly clean your room. Today is Sunday, you don't have any classes, it's a holiday. Why don't you utilize this time in cleaning your room? Now, the teen would have done whatever job needs to be done. Would be like, if the clothes are all around, would just pick it up and throw it in one corner, or probably books are on the table, would just arrange it and pile it then and there itself, not placed it in the exact space. And then when you come in, and you would be like, okay, what have you done? How have you cleaned the room? So at that point in time, while we are communicating with teens, it is very important that we be more specific. That, okay, you fold your clothes, you keep it in the cupboard. You take these books on the table and put it on the bookshelf. So that specific and concrete conversation needs to happen with the teen. Next is use will get back to you. Now, what do we understand by will get back to you? Often the time what happens, the teen also understands that which parent to go to. Because if the child is more close to the father, would go on with their tantrums, and if he or she is demanding of something, he or she knows that which parent to go on to. But at that point in time, the mother and father both needs to understand that if such thing is happening, it is your duty that you as a partner have a discussion about it, that whether this demand needs to be really fulfilled, or together if you'll have to work on to something to avoid it. So that's where you are not like, if the child is going to the father would agree. The father would just let the child know that, okay, I need to discuss it with your mother and then we'll get back to you. So that's how the teen also understands that it is not always that if he or she goes to the father, the demands can be fulfilled. Next is actively listen. Very important. Actively listen is nothing but when the child is trying to explain the battles that they are going through or whatever challenges they are facing. It is for the parents to understand that they actively listen to it and do not interrupt to their conversation. Because at that point in time, when the child is at the urge of venting its emotions or saying something which the parents need a complete attention to, they have to listen to it. And probably at the end, what you can do is, after you've heard to the entire conversation, you can use the paraphrasing technique in order to just summarize whatever you've heard. So this is it. So I hear this is what is the problem you're facing, and this is what you did, and now this is how can we work too. So, in an effective communication, it is always very important that both the parties are equally involved and both the parties work together. So, it is not I and you, it is we. So, when that we comes, it makes a lot of difference. Next, communicating effectively with teenagers. So, working with teenagers, it can be both rewarding and challenging. So, as they transition through adolescence, there seem to be rapid brain development, brain developmental changes, emotional upheaval, and increasing independence. Now, how do we understand a teenage brain? So, adolescence is marked by significant changes in the brain structure and function. And since the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision making, impulsive control, and emotional regulation, is still developing until the child is in its mid 20s. But the limbic system is nothing but the emotional drive, or which helps to understand the child's emotions, are more developed in the teenagers. And this imbalance may help explain why teens may act impulsively and prioritize peer approval and struggle with problem solving and emotional regulation. Now, there was a research from American Psychological Association which mentioned that this developmental mismatch can make teens more susceptible to risky behaviors and poor decision making because they are more vulnerable to their emotions. On the emotional aspect, they every situation that comes into their line or in front of them, they are more to tackle with it on a more emotional aspect rather than critically evaluating, analyzing the situation, and then dealing with it. The next is the communication barriers with teens. Now, there are various communication barriers that works along with teens. First is the emotional volatility. As we said, the teens are vulnerable to their emotions. Therefore, if there is any conversation that is happening between a parent and a teen, the teen would not understand the exact matter, rather would react to it in a more emotional way. So if the parent is trying to understand that, we need to work on your timetable in a way that you have sufficient time for your studies as well as for your extracurricular activities. But the teen would at that point in time not understand how to divide it and just react like, you know what, you always force me towards just looking into academics and not let me focus on my extracurricular as well. You just want me to always sit in front of the book and not move from there. So that's their way of reacting to it in a more emotional aspect. Second is perceived defensiveness. So the adolescents may interpret guidance or advice as criticism or control. That is again because they are in this constant phase of understanding that now, okay, they are gaining some sort of an independence. So when it comes to having a communication with the parents, if the parents is trying to make them understand in order to help them guide their behavior or channel them towards the right path, they always consider that to be as either the other parents are criticizing or they are constantly advising them and they want us to work according to them. The next is limited patience for long conversations. Of course, their attention span is limited at this point in time. So when we are trying to address certain things, it has to be in a very short and crispier way because if it is long lectures or something, there hardly going to be any attention span left in the child because they would only try to picturize the negative aspects of what involves or what are the complaints that they are highlighting rather than not focus on there's something good also that they are talking about. And last is conflicting messages from parents and peers. As we mentioned earlier, that they are in this constant juggle because they have their parental expectation at the same time they have the peer pressure as well. So they are constantly juggling in these two phases because probably the parents are not in approval of he or she mingling with so and so person. At the same time, the child is because he wants to be a part of this group probably get in opposition with the parent. Now, Here are some tips for effective communication. First is practice active listening. So, as I mentioned earlier, when there is a two-way communication that is happening, especially if the child is trying to explain something which is very important, it is important for the parents to understand that they are listening to whatever the child is saying without interrupting. Now, avoid lecturing and criticism. Again, I think I've dealt with this earlier as well, that keep your conversation to points that you need to highlight and which is more important. uh, there are certain behavior that you're not in approval of. So instead of using statements like, you should be doing like this, you can also reframe the sentence saying that I feel this is something that is not in approval of. Can we work on it? Or can we do things better? Things or statements like this. Third is keep it simple and clear. So the more as they try to react to certain conversation in a way, if their emotions are at the peak, then try to keep the conversation more simple and clear and not indulging into a deep conversation. Third is use empathy and patience. So emotional outbursts and impulsive behavior are a part of teens' developmental stage. Empathy does not mean agreeing with them, but it means making an effort to see things from their perspective. So, with the help of empathy, we are trying to understand their point of view as well. Now, offer choices to foster an autonomy. Of course, they are in this phase. We have to let them have this understanding that they have to make certain choices, be it right or wrong. Of course, we are there to guide them, but the minute they try understanding and dealing with the situation and are able to find out various ways or are able to choose a path is also enhancing their self confidence, and in future they are able to make certain decisions on their own without anybody's guidance. Now, be mindful of non-verbal cues. Non-verbal cues are, of course, the body language or the gestures or the signs that are being displayed when the conversation is happening or any information is being communicated, and help them problem solve, of course, because they are overwhelmed with their own emotions. There is a possibility where they are restricting themselves in order to analyze the situation, keeping aside the emotions. But as parents, what we need to understand is we have to bring through such situations in front of them and help them to understand and have a perspective of their own. And if they are in their situation, let's try to identify how they would solve the problem or deal with that situation. And building trust and rapport, which is critical when working with teenagers. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, that trust is something which needs to be gained in a way where it is totally on the parents' hand. When the child is having a conversation with you, how effectively you are involved in that conversation and trying to understand the child would thereby build in a space of trust. And the next time you need not even worry that you have to go and ask them that they want to share something. They would automatically come to you when that trust is being developed. Now, certain general communication tips with teenagers. First is listen more than you speak. So, when the child is trying to explain you something, just hear them out. Of course, you have your thought process, you have your views. It could be dealt towards the end, but while they are in that phase of just constantly telling, this happened, that happened, she reacted like this, like that, just let the person speak and you just actively listen to whatever he or she is saying. Then, next is make time to spend together. Of course, this is how you build an effective communication is when both parties are spending more quality time. So it could be probably after school you decide to go on a walk, or probably just go down and play a small game, be it a badminton game or probably a volleyball game, or maybe just one of the evenings you decide to go out for shopping or probably go out for dinner and things like that. So where you are equally spending that quality time and are able to understand one another better. Now give them privacy. Very important because every time they are in that constant thought that, you know what, my mother and father are not giving me that space, or suppose if their room door is closed, there's a tendency we just want to just check on them and we try to just open the door. So giving them privacy would be just like, if you're entering into the room, why not just knock the door? Third, the next one is keep up with their interests, things that they like. Why don't you also be involved into it? Supposingly, if they want to play, if they are playing a particular video game, why not you also be a part of it and join in that particular game and try to be with them by keeping up with their interests. Next is be a loving parent. Of course, I mean, yes, you are there, you're fulfilling all the needs and demands of your child, but at the same time, it is just like being there for the child itself says a lot of things for them. And the last is nothing but to have fun. Okay. Now, all this while we were talking about the effective communication, how to deal with it, what were the tips, what are the various barriers and things like that. Now, what is negative communication for teenagers? Now, conflict is inevitable when people with different views live together. There is a possibility, and there's always a space for a conflict to happen when a parent is having an interaction with a teenager, because the ideas does not match, perspectives are different, which thereby may lead into a conflict. Now, ongoing conflict can undermine the relationship between a parent and a young person. So that is also something which one needs to understand, that constant conflict, is there a need of it? Or what ways the parent or the child can work on together in order to avoid it? Now, negative communication is a common cause of chronic conflict. And the negative communication is used if the conversation rapidly deteriorates into nagging, yelling, or fighting. Now, it is not just exchange of words, but at times the teen constantly tries, and when they understand that this is the best way out to get something, so that's where they use the tactics of, they know how to get things done. And then you feel angry, rejected, blamed, or unloved. The third is the issue under dispute doesn't ever negatives into positives. Ha. The negative communication can be changed into positive communication is negotiate how you communicate with each other. So this negotiation could be, for example, if the child and parents both are in the constant verge of argument, negotiation could be done where one party decides to walk away at that point in time. That would just help the teen and the parent to calm down, gain more space, and probably then, when it is the right time, it could be resolved. Third, select what is important to argue over. Now, a basic example for this could be, there are a lot of things which the parent and the teen juggles with, and the argument can happen for various aspects. But how would you try to select what is more important? For example, the safety rules while driving is more important, or to argue over cleaning the room is more important. That is where we try to select what is more important and then work on that aspect. Offer constructive criticism, that is, acknowledge and celebrate their achievements. Of course, they know when they are going wrong, they will try to identify it, and they need not be reminded about. But at the same time, we also need to be there to acknowledge and celebrate their achievements and set a good example by apologizing when you're wrong. Definitely. It's not always we find mistakes in teams. Sometimes even the parent probably might be wrong into certain aspect. At that point in time, an apology or saying sorry to your team will make a lot of difference, because of course it's always that they would definitely come to you irrespective of whatever happens. They would come and say sorry. But when you realize that, okay, this time you have crossed your line or you said things which you're not supposed to, at that point in time, if you say sorry, it will make a lot of difference to the team. All right. So coming towards the end of it, so I have like a case study put in here. That is Sarah, a 42-year-old single mother. She was struggling to communicate with her 15-year-old son, Alex. Now, over the past year, Alex had become increasingly withdrawn, spending most of his time alone in his room, avoiding conversations, and showing declining academic performance. Attempts by Sarah to engage him often resulted in arguments or silence. So, if in the today's talk, whatever I highlighted, and we try to sum up with this case study, at this in this scenario, what happened? That of course the mother and son probably were trying to have a communication. But here it more or less looked like it's the mother who's trying to find out various ways, but the child, either if he is trying to explain his perspective, we are unsure whether he's being heard or not, or the next best way which he uses is to just shut himself and not have any conversation. And this, at one point in time, became like it is the monopolizing of the conversation that we discussed earlier. So it is only the mother who's constantly talking about, listen, you know what, you are not focusing on your studies. What do you do in your room? You're spending hours and hours on it, and various other questions being bombarded. You're passing on certain information. You're instructing him to behave in such a way, and things like that, which thereby leaving a space for Alex, nothing but to avoid that conversation and to just completely not have that interaction at all. So at this point in time, what Sarah could be benefit would be that trust and emotional safety. So if she's had that trust built in the child, then Alex probably would come and open up with what other things that he is bothering and things like that. So if it was only a one-way conversation, it again restricted Alex for not opening up. So this again gives us an understanding that if some situations like this probably would be occurring into some of the parents' life, how are you going to deal with it? Is what we try to understand in today's talk. Now, to conclude, communicate effectively with teenagers requires, yes, patience, empathy, and a solid understanding of their developmental stage. We have to know that they are in the growing stage and they are on the venture of understanding various things, dealing with their emotions, their choices, always in the verge of knowing whether the choices that they have made is right or not. How are people looking at them? What are they talking about them? So all such jugglings are happen with them. So while we are having the communication or we are trying to communicate with them, we also need to understand that at one point in time, of course, we also had gone through that phase. At that point, how we were dealt with situations is completely different for now, how the today's teens are trying to deal with their situations. Next is by listening actively, offering choices, providing emotional and family support, helps teens navigate this complex period of their lives. Be there for them, even if they are on their vulnerable state. Try to be around them. Understand that when it is the right time to talk and when it is the right time to talk, let's understand how effectively we can communicate with the child. And more importantly, these skills equip professionals to support teens in building the resilience, problem solving abilities, and emotional regulation skills necessary for their growth and future success. Thank you.
If anybody has any questions, they can please share it in the chat box or unmute themselves. Anybody has any questions?
Hello, namaste.
Hello.
I was very happy to go through the presentation and perhaps uh, the way you have taken us through a journey right from the beginning and the effective communicationness and the precautions to be taken. You have very wonderfully summarized also with the case of Sarah. Personally, I didn't have any question, but I just wanted to appreciate about uh, the the entire process that you have, the journey you have taken us through. It was very wonderfully summarized, and every point, each point you have taken, somehow I felt that it's done very carefully, not missing out any point, because it's just I can say it's a visual journey. If we are able to visualize, oh, there is a teenager in front of me, what the, whether it's a female or a male, what they would be going through in their hormonal changes and all those things. I was really happy to hear in detail, and it was a very advantageous program that you gave. My hearty congratulations to you. Yeah,
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank
yeah.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Hi, Arva. I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, like the kid, right? That child, whether it is he or she, has
Hmm.
got a circle, right? Like the friendship in the school or
Hmm.
surrounding. So we as a parent or grandparents come to know that yes, something is wrong with the circle, friend circle.
Yes.
But still, as you said, they are not in the position to understand that, or when we give them an advice or a kind of a hint, they still don't understand. So but still when they understand, maybe it will be too late to. So what we can do as a parents to bring back to them in the correct route.
Yes, sir. So at this point in time, what you can do is, of course, they are in this constant juggle of parents' advice at the same time the peer pressure, and they know that they don't want to leave that support of the peer as well. But because on a constant note that you are seeing what is actually beneficial for the child, you can highlight it. But the way you're highlighting it, the statements could be like, just reframing the statements. For example, you can say, I see that you've been hanging out with this friend, but I see that there are certain challenges that, which we feel is not according to us in the appropriate terms, or probably is not in line. This is what is our understanding. What do you feel about it? When we ask them what is their feeling or what is their perspective, and try and understand where he or she is, or why he or she is sticking on to that friend. When we get answers to it, then we try again asking them in a way like, okay, if you see this as well, do you feel if this is the right thing? So we are making them understand why are we saying it like this from their mouth. At the same time, we are also gaining answers from them whether it is the right thing to do or not. So let them then decide when the clarity or the picture is right in front of them, that see, these are the pros, these are the cons. And then probably have an understanding whether they want to go ahead with it or they think that they should maintain that certain distance. It's not that they have to end that friendship, but a certain distance which is required, which does not even harm the child. At the same time, the peer, that could be taken care of.
Okay, sure. Thank you. Yeah.
No problem.
All right, I think we can go ahead and conclude the session. Thank you so much, Arva ma'am, for taking the time and explaining this so beautifully. And I'm really glad to learn like the ways that we can connect with an adolescence. And I'm sure we all have something to introspect on and take away from the session. And I wanted to announce that in the upcoming month, which is the 28th of November, last Friday, we'll be having our next webinar. So I would really appreciate if all of us could join us for the same. The topic is mindfulness in practice, evidence-based techniques for daily well-being. So it's going to be an interesting one, and I really wish that you all can join us. It's again on the 28th November, which is the last Friday of the month. Thank you so much for your time. Great presentation, Arva ma'am.
Yeah, it went really well, Arva. So nicely
Thanks.
done. And
Thank you, ma'am.
Sarva ma'am.
yeah, amazing. Lots of examples and very, very clear. And you did a fantastic job answering the question also. Well
Thank
done.
you so much. Thank you. Thank you. It
You
just went on the flow. I was just like, okay, let me go on and on. But I was very, this time I was very conscious about that. I have to explain with examples because that's how I think the presentation felt also in the way. And the way I just planned it, I'm glad that it went according to the
Yeah, good, good. The examples always make a, huge
yes,
difference.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
great,
and the
great.
topic was also such that people would need examples. So you
Yeah,
Correct.
really good job.
thank you.
Good job.
Yes.
Okay, so now you
Happy
can
weekend.
relax. Yes.
Yes, yes.
All right,
Okay, all
everyone.
right.
Okay, ma'am.
See you
Bye,
all.
ma'am. Happy
Bye. Have a good
weekend. Bye.
weekend.
Yes,
Bye.
ma'am.
Ma'am,
Bye.